and Professor Sudhir, Shri Yashwant Sinha, Shri Mohammad Salim, Nilotpal Basu, Professor Sugata Bose, professor colleagues and students and friends. I actually speak to you here as a member of the JNU community. I am a member of the JNU court. I'm one of the Rajya Sabha members in the court. And over the last 2 years, I've had an opportunity to actually attend the meetings of the court and express my concern and displeasure over many of the developments that have been taking place. However, in my own experience, what you have is an administration that is extremely clever at using the rules in creative and destructive ways. And what I did find in terms of my own participation in these court meetings is that we were not prepared well enough in advance. We're not even possibly using the court mechanism to its fullest capacity. Because frankly, I get to meet people just the day before the meeting, and I go there. There are a handful of people who are supporting. The majority at this moment are, at least the faculty is very quiet, and the majority of anyone else on the court is not necessarily supportive of criticism of the Vice Chancellor and his moves. And for everything he does pull out, he says, this is the rule, and all we're doing is imposing it. I did mention to him, because he kept saying, his response to a lot of questions was, this is in court, and this is, something else is sub judice and things like that. So I said, if things are showing up in court all the time, there must be some real problem with the way the university is run. And, but we express our views, and then we get along with the rest of our political and parliamentary life. And as a result, there's sustained pressure. For them, it's a moment of tension. It is not sustained pressure that, that would change the way they would operate. There's no sense that there is scrutiny. The scrutiny did take place when there was all those doctored tapes and the kind of action that was taken against Kumari and others. So that's the kind of situation where I think all of us need to work much more continuously together, proactively, way ahead of these meetings, and have a series of possibly letters from me, Jairam Ramesh and others, addressed to the court, addressed to the Vice Chancellor, which can allow us to go deeper into handling these questions and how we're going to take them forward. Now, in terms of when we're meeting, I asked to speak first. Let me just apologize up front. I do have to be in Bangalore this evening, so I will be heading out at about 4:45 to catch a plane home. Now, but we're meeting at a time of grave crisis in the larger higher education sector. And if we're all here, it is because we are the products of India's higher education and all the good things that it was able to offer us in terms of access and growth and opportunities to consume, to be part of, I shouldn't use the word consume, but to partake of the best that the world had to offer. In my case, I was able to study in India, go abroad and come back. And before I was elected to Parliament, I was a professor at IIM Bangalore for 14 years. Anyway, when you think about what's going on, the crisis is across domains. It's across regulation. The whole turmoil with regard to the new Higher Education Council is part of the, how are we going to regulate the larger higher education sector. The corruption in the system is extraordinary, and this is something that we need to address. There is a problem of quality of education. You already, I think, Sudhir mentioned about equality or access. How are you, one of the most innovative and, what shall we say, just ways of including people from different socioeconomic and geographical backgrounds in JNU. Instead of building on that, we've actually seen the whole process actually shut down. We have, closing down of new graduate seats as well as JNU, under using specious reasoning. There's also, there's a lot of, teaching in academia is hardly attracting the kind of talent that we would like to across the board. So there's a lot of turmoil, not just in JNU, University of Hyderabad, University of Manipur, elsewhere there are examples of something definitely wrong with the system. Now, part of what is wrong with the system is what you would call related to administration and management and how we run things. But the other part, that's a matter of great concern to me, is that there is also a severe ideological threat. And that ideological threat is aimed at ensuring that we close our minds and ultimately become lynch mobs or something of that sort. And so this is again something that we have to really work very hard to combat. A couple of other issues that are cropping up. One is what's happening at the level of the states in terms of higher education, in terms of the quality of universities. And the other issue that's out here, commercialization of education. I'll dwell on that from the perspective of a management professor a little later. But first, I just wanted to mention that in the midst of this turmoil, there have been some interesting changes that have been taking place in the policy domain. One is the Indian Institute of Management bill that was passed last year. Now, this bill actually is a huge contrast to the original draconian bill that Smriti Irani had thought about, and wanted to push through when she was HRD minister. And this one actually goes to the other extreme and introduces tremendous autonomy. But interestingly enough, and I pointed this out, the way autonomy is structured, you leave things to the board and the chairman of the board, and you have the potential for these public assets to actually be taken over by sort of a self-perpetuating board. And so after we raise these issues, I used to be at IIM Bangalore when India's richest man was our chairman. So I know that it's not possible for for very smooth and interactive consultations and discussions and deliberations on how things should be run. It's often they have a short amount of time and things are just steamrolled. So we don't want institutions like that to be taken over by boards and then essentially become self-perpetuating on their own. So now there's a move to try and push back. And so this is part of the challenge. How do you balance with the desire to provide more autonomy, which we all have enjoyed substantially until recent years, and the concern that this shouldn't let public assets, public institutions be hijacked by special interests. So that's one of the key questions that has arisen there. Now, with regard to the Higher Education Council of India, we have, I've been getting quite a few emails from many of your colleagues, and they're very, if everyone's been informed about what's in those emails, I shouldn't even talk about this because there's nothing new to add. The concerns that have been raised there are perfectly on target. This is, the move involves over-centralization. And states will be affected. The ability of states to make decisions on curricula or on priorities, on degree programs, many of these things will absolutely be affected. But the craziest part of this whole move is the amount of power that it allocates to government officers and the Ministry of HRD. Well, it takes away, the old original UGC Act created a UGC that was supposed to be autonomous, that was supposed to promote education and quality and use their grant giving power to ensure that institutions are nurtured. But over time, I think, and maybe multiple governments and parties have to be blamed for this, UGC essentially became subsumed within the HRD department, got more politicized, etc., and the original aim was lost. So we have severe problems with the way it's been running in recent years. But the answer to resolving those problems is not what is proposed by the HECI bill that is, it's not yet before Parliament, but we just had open consultations by the HRD Ministry on this subject. Now, I anticipate that it will come before the Standing Committee on HRD. I'm a member of that committee. And, in this committee, we have enough people who are willing to, it has a BJP majority, but we still have enough people who are willing to listen to multiple points of view. Many former professors and vice chancellors are there across party lines. And just to give you one instance, on the Juvenile Justice Act, when we took inputs from a variety of NGOs and experts, we actually came up with a report that differed from the government's point of view, even though we have a BJP majority and a BJP chairman. So we are certainly capable of doing an honest job of assessing what playing our role as in terms of parliamentary scrutiny of whatever we have to do in terms of improving the particular bill. Whether the government will take that into consideration is a different matter, but it does have a certain amount of weight. Now, the other big concern in the HECI bill is that all the grant-giving power is handed over to the ministry. This is a surefire recipe for corruption and for ideological control, because this particular government can then use the power of the purse to ensure that everyone toes the line. And this is not the first time. Years ago, when Manoj Joshi was HRD minister, in a very interesting move, he cut the fees of IIMs, saying that those poor kids, how can they be asked to pay 2.5 lakhs? Let's bring it down to 25,000. No, it's very nice. But if you were to make a statement on the day placement is announced and people are talking about 1 crore starting salaries, then you really think that this great concern is a little misplaced in the context of at least some sets of students who can, who possibly are earning a tremendous amount in the marketplace. Anyway, the idea of cutting the fees at that time was to ensure that we would go back to the ministry for all kinds of resources all the time, and then we would be beholden to whatever the Vedic management and other agendas that Joshiji had in mind. Anyways, so now as we go forward, there are many reports and committees that we can build on. During the UPA years, we had our own proposals that didn't go too far, but those are up again for discussion. We had the Yashwant committee, which actually went into higher education and how it should be reformed in substantial detail. And one of the things that we were discussing just before this meeting started was that maybe the outcome of this set of deliberations is to actually have a working group and to come up in parallel to whatever is done by the government to come up with an alternative vision. Because certainly the country needs to see an alternative narrative. The Congress party, for one, is eager to present sort of a set of agendas before the people of India, which will ensure that we will be able to pay attention to the access and social justice and the whole notion of higher education as sort of as something that gets people out of their disadvantaged situations and opens the doors to progress across domains. The other issue that I wanted to flag was the issue of commercialization. If you actually look at commercialization, it starts from probably age of 3 or something like that. Okay, the kind of elementary school, nursery school you send your children to, it starts there. The richer people get to send their children to better ones, and that inequality begins there and continues, for decades, for the rest of people's lives. And that's something that we need to address, but we need to address it, in my view, in a reasonably pragmatic manner. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that the government has not been able to provide as much in the sense of, in terms of high-quality government institutions, schools, colleges, universities, as the country actually needs. Given that, and given that we're not going to be able to fix that overnight, we will have to open the doors to others to come in. If you think back, who are these others? If you look at just Delhi University and the names of the colleges, they were set up either by missionaries, St. Stephen's, our Sri Ram College is the Sri Ram family, things like that. So it's not as if government was doing this all the time alone. We've had the Tata Institute, the Indian Institute of Science, endowed by Jamshedji Tata. So this is something that we've got to figure out how to work with in a manner that you don't have commercialization in the negative sense of the term, exploitation of students, exclusion of students. And so one of the ways we can do that is by essentially having parallel efforts that will create a national scholarship fund that will ensure that at least, this is what we've done with engineering and medical schools in Karnataka. We at 50% of the seats are essentially what we call the government quota. So this is something that is open to governments to fill through merit and through affirmative action of various kinds. So that much is there. We just have to regulate to ensure that there are no hidden fees and other challenges that will make it difficult for people to study in these privately run institutions. So that's one of the things that I would bring up. The other side of this whole matter, of course, is about academic salaries and incentives, and how do you attract more people to the profession? How do you engage with the private sector donors and research chairs, things like that, alumni. So this sort of thing also is not very well developed in India. But if you go to the West, the part of the main job of the president of the university or some of the deans is to go out there and raise resources. And this is nothing that will necessarily conflict with the academic agenda. Okay? In fact, if you look at the HECI, one of the real problems that we have is that everything is left to government officers. Where are the academics in this whole space? In terms of, curriculum or any other design-related issues. And this assumption that academics are incapable of this is really the first thing that we need to reject in this whole matter. So we have to find ways to work with market forces in a way that does not come in the way of access and inclusion or of quality, and we should ensure that the government plays a very, very active role in improving and transforming the quality of state-run institutions. Expand the number of state-run institutions, ensure that their impact, their linkages with the local communities in which they operate, with other institutions, across disciplines, etc., is nurtured in a way that, again, is something that becomes, that's driven by academics and the desire to make a larger impact rather than imposed from above. So if we take this forward through additional consultations and the idea of coming up with an alternative vision, then we will have an opportunity to delve deeper into this, think through the nuances, think about how we can build checks and balances, improve the regulatory structure, open our doors not just within India, but to the rest of the world as well to come here and engage. So that's really the larger agenda with which I'd like to go forward working with all of you. So at this point, I think I have taken sufficient time, and I'm not sure there's any Q&A, right? Basically, we'll continue this in different ways. And as far as the court is concerned, please let's engage way ahead of time. Let's examine the powers of the court, what we can actually do, and figure out how we can at least stem and reverse the craziness that you're all experiencing in one of India's best institutions of higher learning. Thank you very much.